all of you here today. I have a couple things I want to announce real quick before we get into our message this morning. One is last week I think I made a mistake. Well, I know I did. I think I asked Chaz to announce, or Justin one, about the singing over at Eden Baptist Church. It wasn't last week, it's this week at 6 o'clock. So if you want to go over there for the worship time at Eden Baptist, there is going to be quite a few people there, groups and people singing, and there will be an ice cream social afterwards. And also for all of you, I want you to know, up here on the front row, there's 5 boxes of books, commentaries, different books that were donated by Pastor David Spray. And if you want any of those books, please make yourself at home and get whatever you need for your study, for your personal life, whatever you want. And then also, I have a card this morning that I would like to read to you. I had the opportunity to go visit Miss Bonnie Aiken, and she said, will you please read this to the church? So I'll put this outside on the bulletin board later, but it says, the world's a better place by far because of people like you who take the time to do nice things the way you always do. Thanks so much. With love to all of you and a heart full of thanks, Bonnie. So she went on and on about how wonderful of a church family you are. That says a lot about your obedience to God, to love on each other, to love on the world around you. I see that every day here with what you do in our community and how you love on everybody around. And it's amazing to see how God's working through you. And our own family, we want to thank you very much too, because you gave us a card and a gift. And Jessie lost her grandfather last week, so thank you so much. It meant a lot to us. We appreciate all that you do. And also, today is a very special day. We have 4 young people that will be taking one of their first steps in obedience to Christ. And it's very special. I'm excited about the baptism today. And over the past few weeks, we've been talking about courage, and it is a courageous thing that y'all are doing this morning. A lot of people go a long time in their lives after they've accepted Christ without taking that first step of baptism. They're a little scared, so I'm proud of all of you. And I told y'all last week that I had my NLT Bible because 2 of the young people that are here today received a Bible, and Miss Olivia's one of those, and they have their Bible. So I wanted to read and preach last week from the NLT because they were going to be here, I thought. And they weren't able to make it last week, but they're here this week. So this week I'm going to, the message will be coming from the NLT, and it will be Joshua chapter 6, verse 1 through 21, if you want to find your way there. And we're going to talk about the courage to obey. When we first started this series in Joshua, we started in chapter 1, we talked about being able to answer God's call, to be courageous to answer the call. And part of that is that we had to be available to answer this call. Not only are we to be available, but we're to be faithful. So when he calls, we respond to his call. And then we have to be obedient. And so then the following week, we talked a little bit about the courage to cross over into new territory. It's not always easy to cross over into new territory because God's asking us to do something maybe we're unfamiliar or uncomfortable with. But if we will remember that we have a God that always goes before us. Wherever he's told us to go, he's already been there. We have a God that is going to be with us through it all. And we have a God who's going to establish us on the other side. So wherever we go, there he is also. And he'll never leave us. He'll never forsake us. If you don't mind this morning, I am going to do something a little bit different because we do have baptism today. And so I'm going to pray. And I'm not going to ask you to stand. I'm going to go through the scripture one at a time. I don't have, the last couple of weeks I've had points and sub-points, but this time we're just going to step through the scripture one step at a time in obedience, looking at what God has to deliver to us. And hopefully what will happen is those things will go from our heads to our hearts. But I want to pray that that's what will happen. Okay? Heavenly Father, we love you and we thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today. That we know that we're not alone, that you haven't left us, you haven't forsaken us, but you are going with us. You are God that goes before us, that stays with us, Lord, that goes through all the things that we go through. There you are also. Thank you for being faithful and covenant keeping God. And Lord, we just simply ask today is that we look at your word, that your Holy Spirit would reveal to us the truths that are there, that we will be able to live them out in our lives, Lord, that because of that we can rest in you and knowing that you're always with us wherever we go. Thank you for the love that you share in this church between each son and daughter of yours, that we together with you can make an impact in this community, that we can be light where there's darkness, and Lord, that darkness has to flee because you overcome all things in your love and with your mercy and your grace, Lord. And Lord, we know that there's another side of you that calls us to be obedient. There's a side of you that wants justice and righteousness, because it's in your justice and righteousness that we truly do see your love, because of the things that you want for your people, or the things that your kingdom is made up of, is truth and spirit. And it's in that obedience that we show you that we love you. So thank you, Lord. May we be able to receive your word and be obedient to it, to apply it to our lives. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, one of the things that I want to remind us of also is that since the time that we last saw Joshua and the Israelites, they crossed over the Jordan River. Now they're on new ground. They're camping in a place called Gilgal, and it's there at Gilgal that they begin a whole new relationship all over again. And they start to reestablish some covenants with God. And one of those is the covenant of circumcision. I know it's not a fun thing to talk about, but it is a picture of us being able to cut away the fleshliness of our life. It's an illustration that what we do is we take those things that separate us from God. We take those things that remind us of the world and the things that we kind of enjoy about our lust and our flesh and all those things. We take those things and we cut them away. We rid ourselves of the flesh so that we can be closer to Him. And so they reestablish that covenant. Not only do they reestablish that covenant, but they also begin to celebrate the Passover there. They're remembering the deliverance that God gave them from the world, from Egypt, from that place where they bound, where they were servants, where they were chained, where they were abused, and they remember His salvation. And then they also begin to reap of the produce of the land. Remember, for 40 years, they've been out in the wilderness wandering. God had fed them quail and manna, and He was the one that gave them the water they had to live on. But now they've crossed over into a new territory with Him. And in that new territory, they began to eat off the land. They began to harvest the promises and the blessings that He told them He would give them. And so here they are camping there, reestablishing a relationship with Him, beginning to have the first fruits of what He promised that He would give them. And so they start on this whole new relationship in this new place. And when they start on that relationship in this new place, He comes to remind them that one of the best ways that we can do that is through obedience. And that's what we're going to look at today. We're going to look at our courage to obey. We're going to look at courage to obey through Joshua chapter 6, verses 1 through 21. And if you'll just simply follow me, I'm going to go through this just a few verses at a time. First, we're going to look at verses 1 through 5. And this is what it says. Now the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites. No one was allowed to go in or out. Remember, the people in the land were fearful. They already knew that God had led the Israelites across the Red Sea, delivered them, destroyed their enemies. They saw them coming close to the river at Jordan. They were already afraid because they knew that that had happened. And then, what had just happened a few days before this, God stopped the Jordan River. His people go forward on dry land. And now they're on the same bank, on the same side as they are. They're scared in Jericho. They've seen what the God of God, the King of Kings, can really do. And they know that His favor are with the Israelites. So remember that as we go in our life, who's on your side? You don't have to be afraid of the world. You don't. Because you serve the God that will deliver you. He goes before you. He is with you. And He will establish you on whatever ground He puts you on. You will be victorious if we have the courage to obey. Remember the God you serve. He is bigger than the biggest problem you've ever seen, because He created all the things that we are around, all the things we see. He created it, and He orchestrates it. And whatever happens, it happens because it's eventually going to be for His glory. It's going to be for our good. We might not understand it at the time. I'm sure the Israelites didn't understand at the time why 40 years of wilderness wondering would happen. Their disobedience. I mean, we got to look at God in a real life. Yes, He's a God that we can obey because He loves us. There's two sides of it. We kind of talked about this morning in our Sunday school class. He is a loving God. He is a compassionate God. He's gracious and He's merciful. But that is not the only side of God. If I paint that as the only picture and I say it's okay, everything's going to be all right, you do what you want to, God loves you, then I will be lying. He is a God that requires obedience. He is a just God. And he is a righteous God. And the reason he puts up those boundaries and those laws and those rules that we look at in the Old Testament is because he loved his people. He wanted to protect his people. He wanted to set his people apart. It is in obedience that we find how much he loves us. Because when we don't do the things he says don't do, it protects us. When we do the things he says do, then we get to reap the harvest and reward of his abundance and his blessings in our lives. But if we simply think he's just a God of love and there's nothing else, then we've done ourselves and the people around us a disservice. Yes, he loves us. But he loves us enough to say, no, here is the boundary. This is as far as you can go. Because if you go any further than this, you're going to hurt other people and you're going to hurt my heart because I love you and I love those people around you. And if you cross that line, you're disobedient. And it's in our disobedience that we say, no, Lord, I don't love you, but I love myself. And that's where Israel had found themselves for 40 years. They found themselves wandering around in their disobedience. And all he wanted to do was love them. And if they would just return to him and be obedient, they would find that love. So we have to establish that right off the bat. Disobedience says, no, God, I don't love you. Obedience says, yes, Lord, I love you. And it is a courageous thing to obey because sometimes we don't understand. Just like we're about to find out with the Israelites. It's not always easy to obey. It's not always easy to do something you don't understand. So this is what he goes on to say. No one was allowed to go in or out, but the Lord said to Joshua, I have given you. He's in control. Whatever problem we face, he has given us that ground. He said, if you'll go with me, I'll give it to you. He said, I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. You and your fighting men should march around the town once a day for 6 days. 7 priests will walk ahead of the ark, each carrying a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to march around the town 7 times, with the priests blowing the horns. When you hear the priest giving one long blast on the ram's horns, have all the people shout as loud as they can. Then the walls of the town will collapse, and the people can charge straight into the town. I don't know about you. For you that were in the military, you know anything about tactics and strategies. I'm shaking my head and I'm scratching my head. I'm going, God, are you sure that's what you want me to do? Here is a fortified city with all of its soldiers behind the walls, all their might, all their power, all that they have, and I don't know what they have. I can't see it, Lord. That does not make sense to me. Because here's what I'm thinking. There's some armed men behind that wall. There's probably some archers. You know, like that would be the equivalent of snipers today. And you want me to march around this wall exposed to the enemy? That don't make no sense. I mean, none at all. And you want me to have the courage to obey you? Well, we have to set the control free. Control is set free. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but there's a lot of times in our lives that God is going to ask us to do things just like he just now asked them to do. And we're going to have to say, Lord, I don't understand it, and I don't get it. But have you ever noticed that how you try to control something, the more it controls you? Like the tighter you put your grip on something, the more it chains you down, the more you're tied to that thing. It's like with my boys. When I try to dominate their life and tell them how to live, the more I worry about it, and the more me as a control freak gets all stressed out because I can't control them. And it worries me to no end. But you know, if I would just simply teach them right and wrong and teach them God's way and release that and give it to God and pray, Lord, I want you to be in control of their lives, not me. Lord, I want your word to direct them, not mine. Lord, I'm going to put faith in you because the more I try to control them, the tighter I squeeze, the further they run, the further they go, and the more they do that I ask them not to do. We have to release the control. When we put it in our Heavenly Father's hands and we just let it go, he will show up in big ways. And that burden we had on our backs, it's gone. We don't have to carry it. We don't have to run with it. We don't have to trudge through life every day getting broken down. Because that's what they tried to do in the wilderness for 40 years. They tried to trudge through that wandering on their own, being disobedient. But one of the first steps in obedience is that we have to be able to just come to God, have the courage to obey, and to say, control is yours. Because I don't know. I don't know what you know, Lord. Even when it looks very unconventional. And we're like, but Lord, the enemy's right there. Like, I don't get what you're asking me to do. It makes no sense in my mind or in my eyes. There's archers, there's snipers on the wall. And they're guns for us. I don't know, they might have hot boiling tar up there ready to pour it out on us when we go by. And you want me to just march? And that's it? Just march? God's calling us to march through this life. Set the control free. Just let go of it. Just trust it. Control is just a thing of our imagination anyway. I mean, have you just gotten up in the morning getting ready to go to work and you think, okay, I'm going, and then all of a sudden you have a flat tire, you hit a deer, your day's changed, isn't it? Control is just a thing that we think we have. But if you place it in your hands of the one who is faithful to be a covenant-keeping God, then you can relax. You can rest assured that he's going to keep his promise and take care of it. Now, if we'll go ahead and go to verses 6 through 10, we're going to talk about conveying God's message. This is what Joshua hears. This is what he says. So Joshua called together the priest, and he said. So right away, he doesn't wait. He doesn't try to scratch his head and say, Lord, I got a better plan than you got, because that don't make any sense. No, he called the priests together right now. And he starts to convey the message. Take up the Ark of the Lord's Covenant and assign 7 priests to walk in front of it, each carrying a ram's horn. Then he gave orders to the people. He didn't only go to the priests, but he went to all the people. He took God's orders to them. He conveyed the message of God. The only message of hope they had, the only message of security they had, the only message that they had that could help them go forward, he delivered it. He conveyed that from God's heart with simple childlike faith. And Joshua really is a picture of that. If you'll read all the way through Joshua, I don't think you're going to ever find anywhere where he questioned God. Joshua simply said, Lord, if you lead, I'll follow. What you say, I'll convey the message. And he was true to that. He would always just go say, this is what the Lord says. And that's what we're called to do. We're not called to repurpose the plan. We're not called to question what God does because we don't know him. We don't know his ways. Our understanding is not even anywhere close to his. Our knowledge is nowhere inside of where his is at. We don't have the wisdom that he has. But if we would be like Joshua and just simply go share the message of hope, of victory, and be obedient, then the world would see us prosper and succeed, and they could prosper and succeed. Because God has a plan. But we have to be courageous to obey that plan. It's not for the weak of heart, that's for sure. Because we don't understand. Then he gave the orders to the people, march around the town, and the armed men will lead the way in front of the ark of the Lord. After Joshua spoke to the people, the 7 priests with the ram's horns started marching into the presence of the Lord, blowing the horns as they marched, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed behind them. Some of the armed men marched in front of the priests with the horns, and some behind the ark, with the priests continually blowing the horns. Do not shout, do not even talk, Joshua commanded. Not a single word from any of you until I tell you to shout. Then shout. See, he delivered God's message. He conveyed the message from God's heart, through his heart, to the people in complete form. He didn't change it. He didn't deviate to the left or the right. He didn't make anything the way he wanted it. He simply said, this is what God says. And that's what I hope I do for you. I hope that I will always convey God's message. From his heart, let him speak to me and change my heart and change who I am before I bring you what he says. And that I will convey that message true. Because that's what Joshua did. That's what God is calling us to do, to be courageous. In this world, all of you are messengers. You know that? You're ambassadors. And you have a message in your heart, on the tip of your tongue, to take to the world around us. Every single one of us. And we're all called to convey that message, to be obedient, to have the courage. Sometimes that courage is to cross the room and to share Christ with somebody. Sometimes that courage to be obedient is to simply tell someone in love, that what they're doing is not what you're doing with their family. Well, maybe for your own family, maybe it's somebody, but you do it in love. Maybe it's the courage to be able to speak up for someone who's being bullied or abused at school kids. Maybe it's the courage to do something you've never done because he's calling you into a new ministry or a new position in the church. Maybe he's calling you to be a missionary. Maybe it's something as simple as having the courage to come forward and join the church because he has a church family for you, but you've been reluctant because you're scared of what that might require of you. But it's the courage of obedience to show him, yes, Lord, I have my faith placed in you. And I'm going to walk with you, and I'm going to go with you. Because he wants to love you. He does. But that love requires obedience. If we're not obedient, we're saying, Lord, I don't care what you want, I'm just thinking about me. And disobedience is a sad thing. For 40 years, they were disobedient. They wondered around why couldn't they have God's blessing. All it required was obedience. But they couldn't do it. And here they are in a new day and a new way. God's saying, just have the courage to obey because I'm with you. I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you. Just go with me. Give me the control, and I will set you free. Just take my message and share it with other people, and I'll set them free. Not only does he do that, but he requires us to be consistent in our submission. And when we do that, we'll look at verses 11 through 16. This is what it says. So the ark of the Lord was carried around the town once that day. That's what he required, right? Once that day. So they obeyed. Carry it once that day. And then everyone returned to spend the night in the camp. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priest again, they were consistent. What they did on the first day, they did on the second. Carried the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests with the ram's horns marched in front of the ark of the Lord, blowing their horns. Again, the armed men marched both in front of the priests with the horns and behind the ark of the Lord. All this time, the priests were blowing their horns. On the second day, they again. It's a little word, isn't it? Again. But to again, day after day, breath after breath, to follow God, to be obedient, to please him with a life of worship, saying, I will obey your commandments because in my obedience I show you that I love you. And I know even though I may not understand it and I release the control of it, that Lord, you will be that every step of the way. That I will convey the message to everyone around me, to the people that know you and are hurt right now, I'll convey your love. To the world around me that don't know you and they're living in sin, I'll convey your love and I'll convey the message that you do have a requirement. And is that we will accept Christ. Just like these young people that we're going to baptize today. They've already accepted Christ and they're going to convey a message today through their obedience to be baptized. That they trust in God and they know that he will go with them wherever they go. But we have to be consistent. We can't be wishy-washy and expect that the world around us will see God through our lives when one day we live in the world and one day we live with him. It takes consistency again and again, even when we don't understand, even when we're hurt, even when the odds get bigger than we are. We just again and again take step after step with him. Because he is faithful to go before us and to go with us and to establish us on the other side of whatever storm we're going through today. He is with you in the storm. On the second day, they again marched around the town. Once they returned to the camp, they followed this pattern for 6 days. Do we follow that pattern? Not just on Sunday, y'all, but look, for 6 days a week. Before Sunday gets here, on that 7th day, have we followed the pattern again and again? Or do we say, Lord, it's Monday through Saturday. I don't love you. But on Sunday, I love you. Sunday, I'll do it all right. But he wants more than Sunday. He wants our every day. Because he loves us every day. He didn't give Jesus just so we can be saved on Sunday. He gave Jesus so that every day we can live in his abundant blessings. And we could come to know him. And that through us, the world around us can know him. Not just Sunday, but the other 6 days. He died for you. And then he arose for you. So that complete number, that 7th day, see, he wants to complete you. That is his number of perfection used all throughout the Bible. 7 days a week. Every week for the rest of your life. He wants you to walk with him and have the courage to obey. He wants you to be consistent in that walk because he is a God who is consistent in keeping his covenant promises to us. And he will never fail us. But he will simply walk with us. On the 7th day, the Israelites got up at dawn and marched around the town as they had done before. But this time they went around the town 7 times. Remember that number of completeness. That picture of being consistent. The seventh time around, as the priest sounded the long blast on the horns, Joshua commanded the people, "Shout, for the Lord has given you this town." Shout, for the Lord has given you this town. When we're consistent in our faithfulness to him, when we have the courage to obey, we can shout. We can shout to the walls. We can shout to the enemy. We can shout to all the obstacles that face us. Because we serve a covenant-keeping God. Because we serve the God that created all the things that stand before us. And he can make them fall. But he requires us to be consistent. Because it's in our consistency that we give testimony to the world around us. It's in our consistency that we give him glory. It's in our consistency that the whole world around us knows our God is greater than anything we face. And he wants to use you and me, all of us, to show the world what a consistent, covenant-keeping God he is. And that when you have the courage to obey, he never fails. He never fails. But there is one thing that we have to look at. And I talked about it earlier. There are consequences for disobedience. He does require that we are faithful, that we obey, that we're consistent in that. So in verses 17 and 18, this is what he says. Jericho and everything in it must be completely destroyed. Not just some of it, but everything. And in our own lives, there's worldly things that we must destroy and get rid of. If you was to take Jericho and put Jericho in your heart and say, okay, that's the world. And that's where the world has set up a fort in my own life, a stronghold. And so before I met Christ, there were these walls that were put up. And behind those walls were the enemies of God. I'm going to have to go in there with God. Not by myself, because by myself I cannot do it. But under his tutelage, under his direction, under his word, we have to go down, and we have to get dirty, and we have to take down the walls completely. It's not easy. But if we'll go with him, he will tear down the walls. And they have to be completely destroyed. We can't leave one up because we're hiding something behind it that we don't want him to touch. That wall has to come down, or we'll not be able to be completely in his blessing. We'll not be able to be completely in his presence because we all know that sin separates us from his presence. It's not us. He loves us, and he wants us, and he'll fight for you, and he did fight for you, and he died for you. But he can't accept sin because the sin hurts him and it hurts other people. And he is so righteous and so just that he does not desire anyone to be hurt by sin. Not you yourself from your own sin, or for you or me to hurt others from our sin. And those walls have to be torn down. But if we don't, there are consequences for that. Because that is an offering that we give to the Lord. That's what he says. Tear down those walls, be completely destroyed as an offering to the Lord. When we tear down those walls in our life, that is saying, Lord, I love you more than I love these things. And I'll no longer worship those things, but I will worship you. And so I offer you my life completely. Submitted, surrendered, all in. I'm not holding on to anything of this world. I'm willing to let you come in and tear down the walls. And that's what has to happen. Only Rahab the prostitute and others in her house will be spared, for she protected our spies. There are going to be people in your life that you're going to think they're against you because maybe they're in the walls of Jericho in your life. But through your love and through your mercy and through the grace that God put in you through his son, Jesus Christ, you'll be able to go, just like they sent spies into Jericho and they talked with Rahab. God could use you to go into somebody else's life that's on the other side of that wall that used to be a place that now is your enemy. Maybe you found it as a good place before. And then maybe they were into all the things that you were into, or maybe you judge them because you think they were into more things than you were into. Because she was a prostitute. I'm sure they kind of looked down on her. How many times are those people in our lives that we think are on the other side of the walls of Jericho of our life and they're the enemy? And we look down on them because maybe they do things that we don't agree with. But if we would simply cross over that wall knowing that God's going to tear it down, and we would take his love on the other side, and we would show people where he's at and the message he has for them, he could save them. He could use you just like he used those spies to go into a land that where the enemy's at and work a miracle. Rahab and her whole family were saved because two spies went across the wall and conveyed the message of hope that was in God. And he can do the same thing to us. But there are consequences for disobedience. So she would have been disobedient. They gave consequences to her for that also. But God gives them, the Israelites, consequences. He says this, do not take any of the things set apart for the destruction, or you yourselves, will be completely destroyed, and you will bring trouble on the camp of Israel. Everything made from silver, gold, bronze, or iron is sacred to the Lord and must be brought into his treasury. When we're disobedient, we can't expect that God is going to treat us like we've done everything he's asked. I don't know about you, but I don't want to be on that end of it. I don't want my life to be completely destroyed because I decided I was going to do things my way. Yes, he loves us, but there is a standard to his love. He called us to be holy as he is holy. When we accept Christ, we take ourselves out of the world and we say, Lord, I'm in your kingdom now. And I'm going to act like I'm in your kingdom because you adopted me. I'm the child of the king. So I'm going to act like a prince, or you're going to act like princesses, and we're going to look like God. We're going to act like God. We're going to show the world God through our lives that we lived out. We're not going to go about running around in the same stuff we used to run around. And we're not going to judge and be critical. And we're not going to hurt people. We're not going to use God's law to beat them over the head like a law. What we're going to do is we're going to say there are some standards, but I love you. We might not accept the sin, but we accept you. And I want to help you see through so you can be obedient to God too. But we're never going to win them or be winsome for Christ if all we do is judge them and beat them up. What we really need to do is turn our eyes inward and say, Lord, because I can only make the choice for me. I can't make it for other people. Lord, show me in my life. Reveal to me where I'm disobedient. Show me another wall that needs to be torn down. Show me a room that maybe I've locked the door on and I don't let you into it. Please destroy this wall, because that one wall is keeping me separated. And I'm not experiencing your blessings or your abundance or the life you created me for because I got this wall. We got to completely destroy the wall. It has to come down. Not only do we have to remember that there are consequences for disobedience, but there's an element of complete faithfulness. And this is what it says in 20 and 21. When the people heard the sound of the ram's horn, they shouted as loud as they could. Suddenly the walls of Jericho collapsed, and the Israelites charged straight into the town and captured it. They completely destroyed everything in it. I'll read that again. They completely destroyed everything in it. With those swords. Men and women, young and old, cattle, sheep, goats, and donkeys. Well, you're like, well, what in the world? How could a loving God do that? When God tears down those walls of our hearts and in our lives, behind those walls are usually the enemies that kept us separated from Him. And that's what those people and those animals and all those things represented. They are the things that we hide, that we keep behind the walls. That if we were to keep them, they would lead us to go back into the life that we had before. Those men and women worshipped another god. They had idols that they worshipped. And if we do the same thing in our life, we'll return back to idols if we keep them around, if we don't completely destroy them. Those animals were used for sacrifices to other gods. And if we keep them around long enough in our own life, the little things that go stirring around, and we try to hide them here and there and not let people see them, just like those animals stirred around out in the yard, eventually they get back in our sight. And we make a god of them. And then we become disobedient. We don't please Him. We don't love Him. Now I'm going to take you all the way back to chapter 5. The last 3 verses, 13, 14, and 15. Because this is where it all started. And this is really important for us to look at. As God's people, we are confronted with a choice to be obedient or to be disobedient. When Joshua was near the town of Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him with a sword in hand. This is a theophany, is what they call it. This is a picture of Christ standing before Joshua. Remember when Moses was out in the wilderness and the burning bush was there? That was a theophany also. And God will give to His people, as He did in the Old Testament, a sign, which He's given to Joshua and to Moses. Moses needed a sign of power because of what he was about to face. He needed a sign of power for his time. That light in the burning bush, remember, was also a light that they saw when God led them out of Egypt with a pillar of fire. Now here's Joshua standing before a man with a sword. And what are they getting ready to do? They're getting ready to go into battle, aren't they? In a very unconventional way. Very unconventional. That often doesn't Jesus ask us to go to war, spiritual warfare, and love on people when they're not loving on us? Like when they're the most hateful to us, we're supposed to love them the most? Seems a little unconventional, doesn't it? But that's what God does. And so here's Jesus. Well, the theophany. Here's the angel of the Lord standing before Joshua. Joshua went up to him and demanded, "Are you friend or foe?" "Neither one," he replied. "I am the commander of the Lord's army." See, Jesus is on the side of right. He is the commander of the Lord's army. We make the choice to be friend or foe by the choices we make, to be obedient or disobedient. He is God's one and only Son. He stands before us. And we have to make the choice. What will we do? What will you do? What will I do with Jesus who stands before us? He's there to lead us to victory. But if we choose the other way, He becomes our stumbling block. And it is on Him that we fall and are crushed. Because He is offered to us for our salvation. Or we can choose Him. He can be our condemnation. It's our choice. What will we do with the choice? At this, Joshua fell to his face in the ground in reverence. I am at your command. He knew who stood before him. And he submitted. And he said, Lord, you're in control. I am at your command. Do we do that with our lives? Do we stand before him and say, I'm at your command? Do we fall on our face and say, I surrender, I submit? You're the commander of my life, and I will follow. The commander of the Lord's army replied, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy. He just took them out of the wilderness warning. He took them across the Jordan River on dry ground. He put them on the other side. And they wasn't in a place of disobedience, but they were in a whole new place, a whole new territory. He said, take off your sandals. The sandals we wear have touched ground on the other side. We walk through this world and it dirties and it dusts and it gets as messy and it gets as nasty. And when we enter God's presence, we have to take all that off. Lay it to the side. And say, Lord, I am willing to stand with you. I'm willing to be holy because all those other things that were on me before made me unholy. I have the courage to obey. I will take off my sandals. And I will stand in your presence. And I will fall to my face because you are the God of all gods. You're the Lord of all lords, and without you I have no salvation. Without you I have no way. No one would go before me. No one would be with me, and no one would establish me if I didn't have you. It's only through Jesus, and Jesus alone that we have that. Take off your sandals. Rid your heart of the flesh that has bound us to this world so long. That it keeps us disobedient because we keep playing with fire. If you play with fire long enough, you get burned. Even when it looks unconvincing and you don't understand it, I beg you to just obey God. Have the courage to place your faith in him, to rest in his will and his way. There is no. Joshua did as he was told. What we do is we are told. We take off our sandals. Will we go into new territory? I see it in your hearts already since I've been here. You are that kind of people. You are people that have the courage to obey. And I'm so happy to be here. I look forward to the years that I will serve you and serve God here. I just ask you, have the courage. Whatever he asks, if you don't see the way, don't worry about it. I promise you, if he asks it, he'll provide the way. He always does. Be consistent in doing it because he's consistent when loving us. Don't dare disobey. And separate yourself from his love, from his blessings. Be complete in your faithfulness and know his complete love for you. That's what he's here getting ready to do right now. I want to show you the first step of obedience and I want to share that with you. Let's be like that. Let's have childlike faith. Said, love him and keep our commands. And he also said that the kingdom of heaven is made up of such as these. Innocent, naive faith like Joshua, who just said, Lord, if you say it, I'll do it. When he says it, let's make a promise to each other that we'll do it. Because the world around us will see a testimony of his greatness if we'll just do it. If we'll just have the courage to obey. I'm going to pray, and then I'm going to ask Missy, come up and sing, and then I'm going to ask all the young people that are being baptized if you'll come meet me over here, and then we'll have the baptistry. The baptism right after that. But this morning I want to ask you, with every head bowed, every eye closed, if you're confronted with a choice today, please be willing to take that and make the choice to be obedient. Are you allowing God to set you free and to control in your life? Are you letting Him have control? Or do you hang on and partially giving control? It's not always easy. Sometimes it's hard, but I beg you to have the courage to just release control and let Him have it, because He knows much better than you. Are you conveying His message to other people, even when it's not conventional, even when it seems difficult? You share boldly about the obedience and what it means and what it does. Are you consistent in your submission to Him? Day after day, 7 days a week. Just living in love in that relationship with Him. And are you willing to face the consequences if you are disobedient? Or are you ready to just turn back to Him and say, Lord, I'm all in. I'm all in. You say faithfulness complete. Or you say, Lord, I'm only willing to do this much, that's it. What will you do? What will you do those everyday choices that you're confronted with? God's asking us to have a faith. Heavenly Father, we love you and thank you. We thank you for the opportunity to dig into your word and to look at your love for us through obedience. That the Lord, the only reason you ask us to obey is because you have a promise that you've made to us, that you take care of us and you'll be with us and you'll never leave us, forsake us. Lord, I ask this morning that we would look at that opportunity to be obedient and to answer that call and be courageous, because through that we show you that we love you like you've loved us for so long. Lord, I ask that every one of us even to evaluate our faith and see where we can obey you, maybe we failed you. But Lord, I thank you for the hearts that hear the obedience I already see in the way they love this community and they touch it and they impact it. Lord, give them strength. Give them wisdom. Give them understanding. Lord, guide our every step and counsel us as we go, so that we can be strong for you in the land where you've planted us, that we can be alive. Lord, we just want to give you our lives as worship so we can know you more and more.